Hello, today I want to start the Fix My Deck series. This was a series idea I had where people filled out this form for me and then I would fix their deck based on the kind of issues that they're having with it. And I didn't think anybody was responding to this form, but apparently I just didn't have the notifications configured correctly. So I feel kind of bad about that. And I want to try and get through these because people put a lot of thought into filling out this form. You know, unlike my other videos where I have a higher production value for these videos, I think I'm going to do them more in a web conference style of video, in part because when I had the idea for this series originally, I was still unemployed. Let me know if you have any feedback about this style of video. Anyways, this person submitted to me a Shadrix Silverquill deck list, and that they want to be political and they want to avoid overt offense and defense and just try to kind of convince people to focus other players. Like one card they call it specifically is Overwhelming Splendor. They just kind of want to scheme and make deals, and they don't want to wipe the board, and there's bonuses if there's like fancy versions of the cards. And there's someone who talks about liking the social aspect of Commander and wanting a deck that encapsulated the yapping aspect of the game. So I can respect all that a lot. So because they mentioned Overwhelming Splendor says creatures enchanted player controls lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 1/1. An enchanted player can't activate abilities that aren't mana abilities or loyalty abilities. So it's kind of like a humility plus effect on an individual player. Now, one issue with this card is it's 8 mana. This deck, ultimately 8 mana sorcery speed, is tough, and what we really want to be able to do is use this in a rattlesnake kind of way. First, what we want Academy Rector, because Academy Rector will let us tutor for that into play directly. This is good because then it's like, oh, if you attack me, I'm going to block and, get Overwhelming Splendor into play. But even better than that, we want to have High Market and Phyrexian Tower. Phyrexian Tower and High Market are both sack lands. And so the ideal play here is we have one of these out and we have Academy Rector out. And then we can sack Academy Rector and put the Overwhelming Splendor into play at instant speed. We also want, so actually a card I put in, I think all of my non-green decks is Expedition Map. And this will be good because this will give us a way to tutor up those sack lands. And actually, speaking of lands, there's something else I want to add in here, which is the maze effects. So maze effects in a deck like this are super strong, because first off, they don't cost you cards. And secondly, they have a very political aspect where, with like Maze of Ith, if someone swings at one of my opponents to kill them, then I can be like, well, hold on, I'll save you if, you agree not to attack me next turn. And then also they can sow discord amongst your opponents because people won't want to attack you because you have the maze effects up, and they'll just attack each other instead, even though that's kind of the wrong play. Like the right play, if someone has a bunch of maze style effects, is the first opponent should swing at that player to force them to tap their maze effects down so the next player can swing at that player and get through. But normally people aren't that coordinated, and they just say like, oh, well, my commander has Sword of Fire and Ice or Sword of Feast and Famine, and like, I want to get this trigger, so I'm not going to swing at that player. And then people start to get really bitter and angry at each other, and a lot of politicking in EDH is actually kind of like sowing bitterness and discord, just like politics in real life these days. On the same line, let's just go ahead and add in all the ones I can remember. Mystifying Maze and Labyrinth of Scophos. So that will give us 4 maze effects. So we've got the lands. Oh, something I want to add then also is Urborg, because we have Maze of Ith, which doesn't tap for mana, and then some of the other maze effects all tap for colorless, so having Urborg is good. So this player has some fog effects. I think we should upgrade these, especially because like one in particular I think we should put in this deck is Teferi's Protection, because there's actually the version of it from the same set that the commander's from, which is the Strixhaven Mystical Archive Japanese one. So obviously you have to remember what the card does or learn how to read Japanese, but I like this art personally. I think in general, this player said that their budget was 100 plus, so I'm just going to add in all the things that I would upgrade here. So Angel's Grace is great. It's basically a fog type effect, but it's got split second, and I love split second in EDH. I also want to add sudden spoiling. This is a good one too. This is basically going to give us a one-turn instant speed version of Overwhelming Splendor, and it's also got split second, which I just love split second in multiplayer. It's really nice when people can't interact with what you're doing. So the commander is 5 mana, which is a little bit high. I've actually run a deck not too different from this, except with Brina as the commander. Now, Brina doesn't have a cool art like Shadrix, so I don't think we can really switch over to Brina. But because we have the commander at a higher mana cost, and because this is a 2-color deck with white, we should take advantage of white's ability to ramp and get us lands, especially since this has a high basic land count. So we want land tax. Like, that card's just very good. We want Archaeo. Basically, we just need to be able to, like, stay ahead on lands and mana. Because ultimately, this is a very resource-heavy form of Magic. And oftentimes, the player who gets the most lands into play wins. And then with cards like Archaeomancer's Map, you can basically ramp as hard as the green player does, assuming you can keep drawing into more lands. So Archaeomancer's Map is a great way for white to get ahead on, or at least stay on par with resources these days. And especially if you have like Archaeomancer's Map plus land tax, it's a great combo. And then we want Deep Gnome Terramancer. He will tutor for planes into play. It's not just basic planes, but any planes cards. Because we added all 3 of those cards, adding Path to Exile is good, because this is a card that will give your opponent a basic land, and then we can do things like trigger Deep Gnome Terramancer, or like Archaeomancer's Map, or land tax. So it makes this a fun removal spell for us. I want to come to the EDH rec page and just make sure there's nothing that I'm missing. Selfless Squire. That's actually a fog effect I like a lot. So it's a really cool fog effect because it's a creature, and a lot of times, at least what I see when people have counter magic, is it's often counters non-creature spells. So they're often not prepared for a creature coming into play and being a fog effect. And then also, this gets bigger every time you prevent damage that would be dealt to you. So even if you use like your maze effects and stuff, this can get bigger. And then of course, this is a great way to punish people who swing at you. All right, like they swing at you for 40 damage, you play Selfless Squire, and now this thing's like a 41-41, and now you can swing at them next turn and kill them. And this player also runs Rogue's Passage, so it'll be easy to like make that an unblockable 41-41. I know some people don't like tutors, but personally, I think we should at least add Scheming Symmetry. So Scheming Symmetry is a tutor for 2 players. It lets, you choose 2 players, probably yourself and one other opponent, and let them search for something onto the top of their library. So this is a highly political card. And I think the player who submitted the form even used the word scheme. So this is very much on theme. And also this is going to help us get some of these things that are only one of, right? Like Academy Rector, it's still only a one of. So it's going to be nice to have a way to tutor it up if like that's what we want to get into play. I mean, I would personally run Demonic Tutor. I know some people don't like tutors, but it's not like this deck is tutoring up infinite combos and things. Let's see, Demonic Tutor, Scheming Symmetry, and Firemane Commando. I really like, this is a newer card that I really like a lot. And this is kind of a subtle one too, where like it just kind of incentivizes people to attack each other. Anytime you can just kind of incentivize people to attack each other, that's a good thing, because again, it sows bitterness and discord, and it makes your opponents not trust each other. And once they don't trust each other, they stop making deals with each other. Even if you're clearly the player they should deal with, they're just going to be blowing up each other's permanents and attacking one another instead of you. And also, I think we should run Ghostly Prison in this. Oh, and I also wanted to add in, I forget the name of the enchantments. One thing I love about EDH Rec is if I just forget the name of a card, it's like so easy to just scroll through and find it. There we go. Blind Obedience. And where's the 1 mana one that I love? Authority of the Consuls. So these 2 cards, Authority of the Consuls and Blind Obedience, are great because they're going to make our opponent's creatures enter tapped. And that's another way to incentivize them to attack each other, because then they won't have as many blockers up. And then also it will include like the tokens we give them. So now we're at 123 cards. So now I'm going to have to cut quite a few cards that this player added into their deck. Oh, I actually would like to add in some more card draw too, potentially. Maybe just Sign in Blood is a good one. Oh, all these MFDC cards would actually be really good in this deck too. But I'll leave it up to that player to look through those and see what they want to add or not. Oh, Rite of Oblivion. This card is really good in a deck like Shadrix that creates tokens. And also this is another sack outlet for Academy Rector. And you can flash it back. So it's 2 removal spells for the price of 1. And potentially you just sack your tokens for it. So that's a really, it's not instant speed, but it's still good. Skull Clamp. That's the card draw this deck needs, because Shadrix makes tokens and Skull Clamp is going to help us draw some cards repeatedly. And then also we can do really fun things like equip it to Academy Rector and then sack Academy Rector to draw 2 cards and get enchantment into play. So this is 25 extra cards. So now I'm going to have to cut a lot of cards that this player added to their deck, which hopefully won't feel bad for them to watch. Debtor's Knell, I like this card. I always want to make it work, but it's kind of slow and it's 7 mana. I mean, admittedly, we have Academy Rector, which can get it now. We'll leave it for now. Duelist Heritage. I don't think we need Duelist Heritage because the commander is typically going to be the biggest creature and it's already got double strike. So let's drop that one. Noble Heritage. I'm personally going to think we should remove this card because I think this works well with that red commander that can have a back, or where it goads all creatures your opponents have if their power is like less than its power. But I think the problem with these sorts of effects like Noble Heritage is that people will basically always choose the mode that works for them at the time. So if they weren't planning and swinging at you anyways, then they're just going to put 1/1 counters on their creatures. And then when they finally go to like swing at you for lethal, they're just going to not do it. So I would personally advocate getting rid of this. Tenuous Truce, I like that. That's fun. Valkyrie's Call. I mean, we're going to have to make difficult decisions about what we cut. I don't think we actually need this card in this deck. Plus it's 5 mana, which is the same as the commander. And it's like, turn 5, we typically want to just be casting the commander. So let's just cut that. Let's cut a few lands right from the get-go. I mean, I love having basic lands in the deck, but we added some of those maze effects. This card, I don't think we need this card because the commander already can give people 1/1 counters, and just we have the enchantments that offer repeatable tap effects now, and this is 4 mana, so let's get rid of that. Tempt with Bunnies, that's fun. Tempt with Glory, this is similar, I think, so if everybody said yes to this, it's true you'd get to put a ton of 1/1 counters on your stuff and then probably just swing over for lethal the next turn. But I feel like that's a trick that only works once, and people should basically always say no to this, and then you just get a 1/1 counter on each of your creatures, which is basically 6 mana sorcery to do, what the commander already does. So I think we should get rid of that. Let's look at these instants now. So Angel Song, we can put some better fogs in. Chant of Vitu-Ghazi. This card's cool, but often we're not going to have 8 creatures out, and we've put some better fogs in. Dawn Charm. I love charm style effects. I mean, it's just fun to have options in EDH. This is another one. I think we should drop it since we added better fog effects. Flare Fortitude. I love that card. Oh, I remember something else we want to add. This is a really fun political card. Everybody Lives. So this is a great way to save the rest of the board from a board wipe and save people's lives. And yeah, this is a fun card. Maybe not for your opponents. This deck, I've reviewed it earlier and already has a lot of removal. I think we can drop Fat Fracture Especially since like we've got the 2 tutors in, and then oh, I realize there's another card I want to put in this deck, which is Wishclaw Talisman. We could potentially use this instead of Demonic Tutor. Maybe we'll do that just to keep this more on theme. So Wishclaw Talisman is, this just like lets you tutor for a card into your hand and then give it to an opponent. So it's kind of like Scheming Symmetry. Pendant of Prosperity is also a very good card, but it's very playgroup dependent because a lot of playgroups, like people just won't use it, even though they should just sit there and abuse it. Orm's Chant, Path to Exile, Sunspawn, Swords of Plowshares. So at 113 cards, still a little bit high. There's one of the artifacts in here that I wanted to get rid of. Oh, this one, Model of Unity. I think this isn't worth running because I think there's only 1 or 2 vote cards in this deck. So I think we'll just drop this one. This is good card draw. Suture Priest. I think if we want to run these sorts of effects, these Aristocrats effects, we should go all in on them. I'm going to say let's cut that. Silverquill Lecturer. Let's see, this deck has 26 creatures. I mean, that's kind of fun and political. Selfless Squire, Orzhov. So this is another one that I think is just not worth running because people will typically just say yes to it when they have no intention of swinging at you anyways. Nels, this card's super good. That guy is pretty good. Lauren, Keeper of the Cord. So this thing, I don't think we need these sorts of effects that like double up on what the commander's doing, because if we want to give our opponents creatures, we can already do that. So I think we can cut those out. This one too. That thing's kind of funny. I've actually never seen this card before. What year is it from? Oh, 2024. Okay. Fane. I like anything that creates these Inklings. I feel like we should leave in everything that creates Inklings. This thing's good. Modified creatures you control of lifelink. So yeah, here's another. I mean, I like this guy a lot, especially since he has Death Touch. That makes him very rattlesnakey. So I guess we'll leave this one in. This card, I think we've put some better card draw in this deck, and the token effect is a little bit weak. This thing's really funny. Bassaries. That one has a lot of potential. 107 cards now. So we still have quite a bit of cutting to do. So yeah, we can go ahead. We can cut Demonic Tutor since we added in. We have the 2 more political tutors. We should, let's get rid of, I mean, it's so hard with Black-White because it has so much strong removal, but I don't think this deck really has the card draw to just sit here and 1-for-1 people over and over again. And we've got Anguish Unmaking, and we've got some tutors now. 40 lands is, what's the mana curve of this deck? The mana curve is definitely enough. We could probably cut 1 land. I'm doing the bad thing. I'm cutting lands. Now we're at 105 cards. Since we added Teferi's Protection and Everybody Lives, I don't think we need Unbreakable Formation anymore. Debtors now, I mean, since we have Academy Rector and we can get into play, it's probably playable, but I've had bad luck with that card. 104 cards. This is a card that could almost be the commander too, which could be kind of fun. I mean, you have to change the deck a little bit, but it would definitely help with the political stuff. All right, let's get rid of the Ellis. So we're at 103 cards. All right, yeah, well, D-Spark is a strong card, and that's pretty sweet art. So Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile have a lot of art options. And Swords to Plowshares also has the Strixhaven art. Oh yeah, I forgot, with Strixhaven, there's also the like English alt arts with the different art. And then there's also the Japanese thing. So I mean, I like that, like Strixhaven, it's from the same set as the commander, so like, you know, putting in that is cool. Sudden Spoiling, this card looks cool as a foil. We're at 103. Got to make some really difficult choices now. You know, I think we should just get rid of Debtors now because, I mean, it is 7 mana. I mean, I know we can technically get into play for free with Academy Rector, but we probably want other things like Overwhelming Splendor and even Ghostly Prison. And also we have a lot of other effects that allow us to return things from the graveyard to play. So let's drop that one, especially since we don't even know if there will be things in the graveyard for us to get with that. Oh, actually, since we have Expedition Map, whenever I add Expedition Map to deck, I usually take out a land because Expedition Map, if it's in your opening hand, it's basically a land, right? Because turn one you play it, and turn two you just sack it and you get a land. I would actually count it more as like Expedition, 39 lands, and our Archaeomancer's Map. Basically, it's like we're running 40 lands. All right, we're at 101 cards. We're at 101 cards. I'm going to cut D-Spark. This might not be the right play because it depends on the person's play group. Like maybe they really need to exile any permanent. But since we added in Path to Exile, and normally you want to exile creatures, I'm going to get rid of D-Spark. And now we can try playtest this a little bit. So this hand would only be keepable if an opponent has white so that we could play land tax. So we're not going to assume that. We're going to mulligan. Okay, so this hand seems fine. So, because I mean, we got this thing that creates Inklings, and then we've got Skull Clamp. Oh man, we just drew Felwar Stone. Okay, Soul Ring, Felwar Stone. Draw. Plains, we've got 5 mana. Combat Calligrapher and Skull Clamp. Draw a card. Swamp. We can play Shadrix. Then we could make an Inkling token for ourselves. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'd still have the 1 mana to draw 2 cards off of it. So that seems like a very strong start to me. Obviously, we should try again because, I mean, you don't normally start with Soul Ring and another artifact. So let's see. I mean, this seems fine. Like we've got 2 lands and potentially we can draw a card off Welcoming Vampire and then Envoy. So we play Plains into Arcane Signet. Let's play Welcoming Vampire, and we'll play this tapped land. Technically, there's tapped. And then we'll play Plains, and we've got 5 mana. I think we play the Commander, and then we'll just draw a card from having an Inkling enter. So again, that feels like a strong start to me also. Oh, we've got Skull Clamp, so like once we play Skull Clamp, we can start like drawing some cards and we can get some of these things like Maze. And of course we have this Core Haven. There's actually one other card I want to add to this deck I just realized, which is Opal Palace, because the Commander has Double Strike. Palace like make the Commander a little bit bigger. So anyways, that's my idea. I'd still add in like the MFDC lands. Those things are just like so strong, and there's definitely a few that are worth, like Hegra Mauling at a bare minimum. And then we can drop like a Swamp. And I'd probably run quite a few of the other ones, like the Graveyard Exile one and Sejiri Shelter to protect the Commander. Oh, Fel the Profane, that's another removal one. So ultimately, I mean, I just made this deck cost like $400 more, so I don't know if the player really wants to just drop $400 on this deck, but that's my idea of how I would start by improving it. Anyways, I hope that this format was useful. If people like it, let me know. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching. See ya.